Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday. It means time for the office hours here on the Academy. Welcome all and welcome, Andrew. Shall we get going?
We shall.
All right. Hello there. Welcome to the office hours. This is where you can learn about Intune, ConfigMgr, imaging, and many, many more things. And this is also where you have the chance to ask us questions on any of those topics. It is great to be back. I heard that you were in good hands last week, joined by not only Andrew, but also Aaron Tchaikovsky and Michael Nystrom, to a long time supporters of our platform and everything we do around on these technologies. So I saw heard that was a good few of laughters in that session.
Yes, without you to keep us on track, it's easy to go off the rails a little bit. But I'm very happy to have you back this week with us. But we had a blast last week. A lot of great conversation, especially surrounding security and things like that. And it was really fun to have those guys on.
All right. So what's been going on, Andrew?
Well, it seems that we're getting towards the end of summer because now I'm starting to see tools get pumped out, new tools weekly, new updates weekly, new announcements weekly. Again, we always have something on here, but I can definitely tell when everybody's back at their desk. So one thing that I came across today that looked really awesome. If you'd like to share my screen, there we go. Thank you, sir. Is Ugur Cook released an Autopilot import GUI, and I go straight to his tweet about it because he had some nice demos here in the tweet, but also has a follow-up blog post that I'll be sure to post in our links for this evening. But this is just another tool that helps you get your hardware hashes and everything imported into Autopilot a little bit easier. There's a lot of different scenarios in which you may want to import that information. And so he's got some, the replies aren't showing up in here, probably because I'm not logged in. But he's got some good scenarios here that will basically aid you in doing that. So great stuff. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show, is that you can run this while you're setting up a computer for the first time. So great stuff. Really excited to try this out myself. For our Dell admins out there, Dell Command update version 5 was released earlier this week. So there are a couple of links here for the UWP app and the Classic app for that. Good stuff there. Mike Danoski also tweeted out that the cataloged settings list for Intune has been updated. So the Intune team has been adding these various settings definitions up on Intune for the last couple of months. You can see that there was the initial upload back in March, then one right after MMS in May, and then another one in July. So this is a great reference to be sure, especially as we get more and more settings available. And I've seen a little bit of conversation this week that some of the settings have their verbiage changing and that sort of thing. So this is a great resource to be able to keep on top of those settings. Another big announcement on the update front is that we had our monthly Intune release. Intune Service Release 2307 came out, mostly surrounding Google Play, Android, iOS, so not something that Johan and I focus a lot on, but I know that's important to a lot of you out there. One thing that really caught my eye that I believe we talked about a couple of weeks ago that this was coming is, and I wanted to point it out again, the change to the default settings when you're adding a Windows PowerShell script in Intune. So previously, when you would create a new script, it would automatically default to running the script as system. It will now default to running the script as the logged in user. So if you're used to running those scripts as system, which I'm sure most of us have become accustomed to, that is something you need to pay attention to when you're creating new scripts now. So, and did want to point out that this does apply to new scripts, not existing scripts. Um, Lastly, something that I ran into this week, and I came across a couple of blog posts. It seems that I'm not the only one that's run into this. We talked about a couple of times over the last few months because we knew that this was going to be coming. But the PowerShell SDK for Microsoft Graph, or the Microsoft.Graph module, has been updated to version 2. This is a potentially large change, especially if you are used to using the beta REST endpoint, because that module now by default, actually, I shouldn't say by default, will only point to the V1 REST API in Graph. So, something that a lot of us have become accustomed to was running the select MG profile commandlet to switch, say, get MG user commandlet over to the beta REST endpoint. Well, that commandlet now no longer exists. So once you upgrade to version 2, you may run a script that had that select MG profile commandlet in it, and it will now error on that command. So you now have to install the Microsoft.Graph.Beta module. So we can still find that on the PowerShell gallery. I'm positive I can find it because I just installed it yesterday. Let's see here. Well, it is called Microsoft.Graph.Beta. And so the difference between the two now is they've split out the two modules. One points to the V1 endpoint, the other points to the beta endpoint. And on the beta endpoint, let's use the example again of get-mg user. If you're running that with Microsoft.Graph, if you want to run it against the beta endpoint and use that other module, you have to run get-mg beta user. So it's a big change if you are used to using that beta endpoint. And there have also been some challenges that the community's come across when updating to that new module version. So one thing I came across myself, but then I found a post from Morten Knudsen. If you may get an error that looks like this: could not load type Microsoft Graph authentication from assembly. And usually what this is referencing is a DLL. So even if, and this was my exact experience here that Morten's talking about, even if you had updated the module to version 2.2, which updated a DLL as part of the module, the commandlets would be referencing an older version of the DLL that was still found in your module path. So this was causing me a little bit of grief yesterday. What I ultimately ended up doing was going through and removing all of my old module versions manually. Well, using PowerShell, but I wasn't using uninstall module. Went and deleted the directories, and that seemed to mostly clear everything up. So just something to keep an eye out for if you are updating that module. Another issue that I know Johan and I have both come across, and I've seen it now in a couple of different places, but here over on the Evotec blog, he blogged about it earlier this week. If you get the error function cannot be created because function capacity 4096 has been exceeded for this scope. This graph module often loads a bunch of submodules, ultimately taking the default PowerShell setting that will only allow you to load in 4,000 functions and will load in more than 4,000 functions. So there are a couple of ways to do that, to get around that. One is to just simply increase the function count. You can actually go in and adjust those limits. So there are two different limits, and that's what's in this blog post. Is there's a global limit and I believe a script limit. um, and this will help you get around that challenge. I've also gotten around it. I don't know if it's the supported way to do it, but more explicitly imported some of the modules with some of the sub modules within that Microsoft.Graph module. So there's a lot of information there. If it sounded confusing because it was a lot of information, I was just as confused myself. So really what I was hoping to do today by talking through some of this was just give some resources and some heads up to you, Johan, and many others in the community that I think what I've gathered will undoubtedly run across these issues. So that's all I had.
Wow, that's not just that. That's a good chunk of information. I did. Let me share my screen real quick. So I did found that module you were looking for earlier. See why it doesn't. There we go. You have put in a dot in between both the words. And then so Microsoft.Graph.Beta.
Perfect. Thank you.
A trick I learned by searching for in PowerShell Gallery is that by default it's sort by relevance, but often when I'm looking for updated things, just switching that and sort by recent helped me find stuff that I was looking for. So that's a good little tip there as well. I think also I stumbled across the quote of the week or the quote of the day, thinking about printing t-shirts on this, but it was basically, we do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
That's right. Story of our lives.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I'm like, okay, that was a twist of a more hardcore quote, of course. But all right. The last week we also saw the release of the technical preview of ConfigMgr. So 2307 is available, and not only do they have some new features of it, they also I also learned that they extend how long it's valid, and I think it was 180 days these days or something like that. Way more than the 60 or 90 days that I used to support it before. So that's a good welcome change, because I've lost count the number of times my technical preview lab expired just because I didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
So good stuff there for sure. This one in particular, I think, is going to be useful to help transition for Windows 11, which I know that you guys covered a little bit last week, and as well we have been covering it about 2 weeks ago regarding the changes for Windows 11, 23, H2, etc. Another welcome press release was the announcement of the upcoming 2309 Config Manager, which will incorporate many of the features that are in 2307 Tech Preview. But this one will be released around the October timeframe. And they say that they will include features mentioned both on the 2307 TP and, of course, the other technical previews that has been in between 2303 and 2309. For those of you who might have missed it, ConfigMgr or the ConfigMgr team that did change their cadence recently. So gone are the 3 times per year major versions. It's going to be released 2 times per year instead. They still release roll-ups, etc. in between. I know you guys talked about the latest one for 2303 last week, so just making sure you deploy that one if you're on 2303. But other than that, there was a ton of welcome changes in the upcoming 2309. One that got me super excited. Well, I am obviously a geek, so it wasn't too obvious. But when you do deployments through Pixie, you can now tell the client which Pixie server to use. Prior to this feature, what happens is that clients will typically use the management point that the distribution point that running the Pixie server uses. And a lot of times that's perfectly okay, except for the scenarios when you have one client like down in Switzerland somewhere and your distribution point happened to be in the UK. Suddenly they are reaching over a WAN link that may or may not be optimal for the scenario, and it will take a dang long time to get down the policies. So excited about that. Some changes also around BitLocker in the sequences. So now it's available when you use the provisioning TS for those of you doing that. So very excited about that.
All good stuff.
Good comment from Jim there in the chat. Right, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Mentioned this as a small mini MMS. I don't think we can call it that, but speaking of MMS, if you guys are heading down to Miami this fall, I highly recommend this conference. It's the best conference there is if you want to learn Intune and ConfigMgr and other related topics. By far the best conference. Running typically twice a year. We just had the May one in Minneapolis, and now we have this one upcoming just over Halloween now in Miami in October. So hoping to see you there.
Likewise.
All right.
Looks like we got a question
that's coming in there.
Yeah, it looks like we've got one coming in from YouTube. So leadership wants everything in AWS, but 90% of our devices are on-prem. So I'm pushing for ConfigMgr to remain on-prem. Should I keep everything on-prem, move this site, but keep a distribution point for OSD, try hybrid Azure AD, join Autopilot, or any other recommendations?
Well, that's a fairly... I'm going to close these for now, but it's a quite common question, trying to figure out what workloads to move over to a different data center, because that's really what it's about. The moment you start to host a ConfigMgr server or some of the roles in the cloud, you just change into a different data center that is hosted by someone else. So it continues to work and has the same feature set as it always has, no matter where you put it. I have always been a little bit hesitant of putting up the entire infrastructure in the cloud, not because of functionality, because it works beautifully. It's because of the cost. One organizations that we talked to that were planning on doing this, they were paying basically every month. They could buy a new on-premises server that will host their entire ConfigMgr infrastructure. That's how pricey it was to upload their environment to, in this case, Amazon. But apart from that, it's just either you upload the entire infrastructure and run it from there. If you want to have local distribution point, which is a quite common scenario, so they are like closer to the clients per se, you can absolutely do that. You can continue to leverage the same type of technique as you would do for an on-premises environment where you leverage peer-to-peer to reduce the infrastructure. You can do that even when the servers are up in Azure or Amazon or any other data center for that matter. And the beautiful thing about that is that that will allow you to reduce heavily the number of servers that you need And that means also that you're reducing the costs heavily for the stuff you run up in the cloud. So obviously, it's cheaper to run 5 servers up there than 55 servers. Simple as that. But just watch out for the cost and try to simplify the infrastructure as much as you can by leveraging smart solutions that are supported by the platform and peer-to-peer in particular. And I think it's an absolutely great idea. Anything you'd like to
Just
add there, good sir?
just to add on the question about hybrid Azure AD join Autopilot, while that may look like it is free in dollars, you still have to consider the cost that it will take to support that solution. So, if, in my opinion, if leadership agrees to move things to AWS, even if that's your config manager infrastructure, to Johan's point of simplification, moving config manager to AWS and separately not implementing hybrid Azure AD join Autopilot is likely a simpler scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a great question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there? Anything we can answer for you? I did get a question sent in earlier today on LinkedIn, and that was regarding Autopilot in general. And the question was simply, were there any issues last week? We have a lot of troubles. Yes, there were some issues last week that has now been resolved as far as I know. But it was pre-provisioning scenarios and regular user-driven scenarios that just had a hard time a few days last week across many regions. So, yeah.
You know what else we didn't talk about? Was this just over the last week? The ability for users to uninstall apps in the company portal.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
in the 2307. Yeah, exactly.
How could I forget to point that out? That was a big deal.
Yeah, a lot of people were excited about that one. As far as I know, I did not show up in my tenant yet, but hopefully soon.
Let's see.
All right, we have a question coming in on YouTube. It's from Jim. Can you check to see if you're able to export results from your compliance policies? My Excel documents come out empty. Anything you tried, Andrew? Because I have not.
I have not, but I certainly can
Give it a
create
go.
one. Yeah. Nothing's ever gone wrong in a live demo, right?
Not exactly. What can possibly go wrong in a live demo? You want me to share your screen, or are you waiting for it to?
No, that's fine. You can go ahead and share it. I'm already clicking through. I'm just creating a compliance policy real quick. I'll just go ahead and assign to a group. Let's just assign to a random group here. It's actually a group without devices. Oh, I did exclude it.
So close.
The amount of times I don't know how my brain still does that.
Well, I think they should move away the excluded groups, like to the far right corner somewhere, lower right corner.
Yeah.
Because you're not alone.
Well, that's good to hear. I'll if I need to exclude something, I'll seek it out then. All right. So we've got a policy. Let's go ahead and export. And if I open this, if that is, let's see, maybe that's not the same export that Jim was asking about.
No, it's probably the result of the policy, not just. the view from the blade.
So I would have to go in here, and I have no results right now. But that is actually easy enough for me to test. So I am willing to accept that homework for this evening.
Well, I did. Let me. I'm not entirely sure if this what the question was about, but uh, 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 here it is coming. I think it takes a while for it to show. Here we are. So I'm in the result of the device status on a policy, and when I export this data, it sure show up all these details at least that I have. I'm not sure if that was what the export was about, but it does show data. And yeah, that was exactly what Jim's question was about. And yeah, it shows up nicely in that CSV file. If you don't get any data, I have no idea on why. That might be. So I would recommend filing a bug on that one because it could be some issue with your tenant.
Definitely.
And for once, I'm remarkably compliant in my lab at the moment.
It's incredible.
That's usually not the case. I usually break things left and right when testing things, but right now I'm compliant. So I'm very, very pleased.
That's looking good.
Yeah.
All right. We've got a question from James on YouTube. Have you seen any issues with E5 enterprise SKUs not upgrading hybrid devices to enterprise and instead moving back and forth between pro and enterprise?
I mean, I have seen plenty of issues with subscription-based activation in general. The most common scenario is licenses, where basically one user logs in, they have a license, he or she have a license, and it gets nicely upgraded to enterprise SKU. So they continue to work with that one. And then they need help from someone like help desk. So help desk logs in, and the person from help desk does not have a license. And congratulations, that machine now gets downgraded to professional again. So that could cause it to flip flop. Basically, that you have users with different type of licensing using the device. There is a registry key that you can set. I doubt it's supported officially. I haven't seen any documentation of it, but basically, if you have this issue and you call Microsoft support about it, they tell you to set that key. Long story short, for shared devices or for devices that are shared with multiple people there. So maybe something like that. But those are kind of tricky to troubleshoot. Otherwise, anything that you stumble across, Andrew, that is different?
Not personally, no. I was trying to find a post on that because I've heard Jurgen talk about it before, a
Yeah.
similar scenario, but I'm not coming up with anything at the moment.
I mean, it's a quite common issue. These subscription-based activations. I won't say every single customer, but plenty of them have had these types of issues. All right. Any other questions out there? Great questions. We have a whopping 29 minutes to spare. And I still have barely, well, a little bit coffee left.
More than I have.
All right. Question coming in on YouTube. Hi guys, do you know of any way to stop Edge in Windows 11 22.02 from pinning itself to Taskbar and stealing the default browser and PDF file association for the new users? No, I do not. I'm assuming there will be a policy for it somewhere. Taskbar, of course, can be overlaid with a custom XML association used to be able to apply an XML for as well. But if this is only for new users, yeah, I have not tried that in 22H2. I know where to go though. For everything customization in any given version of Windows,
Yep.
you need a Jürgen in your life. Jürgen Nilsson that we mentioned many times here on the Academy, but he has published a gazillion of settings and blog posts around customizing this. So maybe that will help.
Yep, and I think specifically your search right there should be perfect because there are a few posts surrounding Taskbar specifically in Windows 11. There's one of the other ones I was looking at. An interesting thumbnail that he has on that second post.
Yep.
So it's funny. We got a similar question on customization on the deployment research blog yesterday that I answered that pretty much directed them to Jürgen's blog for that same
That
reason.
was the one on optimizing Windows 11 for the enterprise.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Andrew. I wanted to mention that anyway. Brilliant. So I started working on a blog post that basically sharing some ideas, notes from the field on what organizations are doing to adopt Windows 11 for the enterprise, because some of the default settings are, to put it mildly, not optimal for the enterprise network. A lot of the Windows 11 settings are basically for consumers. And last time that is quite the opposite. Last time I checked it, that's quite the opposite of an enterprise organization. If you have additional ideas and feedback, please go to this blog post, leave something in the comments in the below or further down in the post, and I'll be happy to add that in. So I figured we can do some crowdsourcing on this one because, quite frankly, this is what organizations are stuck with right now. And they have about 2 years to figure this out. So get going.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
Yep.
I did actually happen to find the blog post that I was looking for as well from Jürgen. It just actually happened to be on the For SysOps blog rather than the CCM exec blog.
Oh yeah, he did some guest blogging there. Do you have it up?
I do.
So
this may... There we go. Thank you, sir. This may help. This is related to the prior question surrounding enterprise activation. Jürgen's got some tips in here to help you troubleshoot that because, like Johan said, it is a common issue. And so I just want to make sure, I'm going to make sure this gets posted in the links for this evening as well. I don't know if the specific issue that you're experiencing, James, will show up here. But this is a great starting point, I think, to help you troubleshoot that issue. So, Jürgen's a busy man. Sometimes you've got to track down his posts in a couple of different locations.
Yeah. Oh, I saw a lovely comment in the YouTube chat there. Is it true that every time someone uses hybrid autopilot, an angel loses its wings? That might be the case, yeah. Would not surprise me one bit.
Not at all.
John is asking, is there any indication that Microsoft will make improvements or make more improvements to Windows 11 settings so more organizations will upgrade? Them fixing the ADMX templates is a good start, and I totally agree. Version 3 of the templates, where they ironed out a lot of the issues between having the same templates for Windows 10 and Windows 11. That's a fantastic start, but I haven't stumbled across any other type of announced improvements for customization things in Windows 11. But I mean, they kind of have to, because some of these settings are basically, I would say, preventing, because you can still deploy Windows 11, of course, but it will make organizations sort of ease their pain a little bit migrating if it was down to the same level as we have in Windows 10 today. I think.
Yep. I agree. Totally. And I co-presented a topic with Jürgen at MMS in May surrounding customizing Windows 11, and with the amount of people that were in the room, it was obvious that
it needs some more love.
Yes, and it's a challenge for a lot of people. And I think he put it similarly to how you did, Johan. This is just kind of what we have right now, and that's it. We don't have some secret sauce good news to share on it, which is unfortunate. But I share your optimism. I think in that they're going to have to do something. We'll see.
Yeah, we had a great follow-up question here on YouTube, and that was regarding the optimization post. Do you recommend removing selected inbox apps? I don't have a problem with that at all. There are certain applications and consumer features that I don't consider belong with an enterprise OS, and there is a bonus point of doing so, and that is all these components in Windows, they get updates all the time, and there is a significant difference in having to update 30 components versus say 22. It's basically a third less of, give or take, of updates that has come down to those devices. The only sort of not caveat, that's not the word, but the important part is to, when you do so, use supported methods to do so. Don't just find this super fantastic decrapifier script that you found on an obscure blog somewhere and just run it without even reviewing what it's doing, because some of these scripts, they do unsupported stuff as well. And unsupported stuff has this little tendency to come back to bite you pretty hard later. My favorite example on the topic is that there were hacks that you can do back in early Windows 10 to customize the taskbar before it was even supported to do that in Windows 10. Microsoft finally added support for that in Windows 10, so that was great. But for those organizations that did these hacks, almost 2 years later, they were not able to upgrade to the next version of Windows 10 because of that hack they did 2 years back in time. And stuff like that is, I mean, if troubleshooting can be bad, those are real bad. It's really hard to track down because of it. So by all means, do customizations, but keep them through supported mechanisms, because those are tested. Unsupported hacks are not. That's my take on that. And hi there from Belfast. Glad you can join us, even though the hour. Thank you for joining us late. So let's see, there was another question coming in. How to get rid of Apex for stale profiles. Ooh. That I do not know. I mean, if the profile is nuked or deleted, there should be nothing that calls them. If you're talking about user-based applications here, that's the only thing that comes to mind. I have not stumbled across that scenario. But it brings up an important point. Updates to Windows in general. We're not talking about Patch Tuesday here. Like every other day, these components that are built into Windows 10 and Windows 11 do get updates. Some of those updates are security updates that they have to be patched. And sometimes you have vendor packages like HP, Dell, Lenovo. Sometimes they bundle an Apex package, so basically a store app, together with their drivers. It's like a little pairing going on between the driver and that package. They sometimes need updates as well, not just for functionality, but also for security. So keeping those updated is a big part of it. I doubt any of you can go into your security department to say, hey, you know what? We're thinking about patching just some of Windows. Would that be okay? And they'll go, no, that is not okay. You have to patch all of it.
Absolutely. There were some follow-ups here from Jamie. This is a tricky one because removing the provision package should clear it. Obviously, in some cases it doesn't, but you can use the all users switch on remove Apex package to help. But a couple of additional points. Not having the version exposed in the Apex, that makes it a challenge. If you're only wanting to remove older versions that have gotten stuck behind. And yeah, an accurate last used indicator on those Apex packages challenge as well.
Yeah. All right. Anything else out there?
Checking around LinkedIn and YouTube, make sure everything's coming in. Looks like it.
Yeah, of all the four streaming platforms that we are doing for the office hours, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, YouTube is by far the most popular one to watch these events. So that's pretty cool statistics to see.
Definitely.
I like to say that out of 10 questions, like 8 or 9 are from YouTube. So that is pretty.
Oh, yeah. And then a handful from LinkedIn usually.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was a comment regarding have you heard anything on Windows 11 23 H2 and enablement package? Yes, indeed. That was done through a formal announcement about 2 weeks ago. They published a document called the July Roadmap for Windows 11. Do you happen to have that link handy, Andrew?
I do, if you'd like to share my screen.
I do. So they have announced that 23 HT will be an enablement package, which is fantastic because that makes it very easy to go from not 21H2, but from 22H2 or Windows 11 up to 23H2. I don't really recommend anyone these days to deploy a 21H2 Windows 11, but rather go to 22H2 right now. And once the 23H2 becomes available, and we've seen that it actually works somewhat, then you can start to do upgrades to that version. Because it's going to keep the same version. It's just the features that are being enabled. And that, if it follows the tradition of how Windows 10 did it, it typically means that the amount of testing that you guys have to do for drivers and BIOS updates and TPM versions is a bare minimum, which is not the case when you go from 10 to 11. There is a lot of more testing involved in that process. But once you are up on 22H2, life should be much, much simpler to go to the next version. Once you're up on Windows 11, 22H2.
That's right. Very exciting announcement. That makes things so much easier.
Oh, heck yeah, absolutely. I was so sad when I didn't do that for 22H2. I was like, dang it. Wanted that, but all right, you can't have it all always.
Nope.
And just because we said we didn't have too many questions from LinkedIn, one question from LinkedIn just showed up in our little feed here. The question was basically around when I fix a boot in ConfigMgr, it goes through the boot process and then it skips. How can I troubleshoot that? Should I recreate the boot image? Thanks. ConfigMgr is quite simple to troubleshoot in terms of Pixie. Let me steal the screen here or add my screen to the mix. It's going to take a little while, but here we are. If you have a ConfigMgr DP or one of them, I have a few, as you do, but on the distribution point, troubleshooting doesn't really matter which type of responder you have, but there are a few things you need to make sure is available. First of all, this one obviously needs to be enabled, but I also recommend to pick these three because that allow you to use the WDS-less responder, which in my opinion is a better Pixie responder than the one that is based on WDS. But both of these responders that you can enable, they will generate a log file on every distribution point. So if you go to the folder where the DP has its own stuff, the logs folder here, you will have an SMS Pixie log file. And this log file will show you every device as it boots and whether it's being offered a deployment or not, etc. So that's where I will start, because most time it's as simple as, yeah, the device that you're trying to deploy doesn't have a deployment. The classic example is you have a deployment to all unknown computers, but you deployed that machine once before, so it's no longer unknown, it's actually known. And for it to be able to pick up the deployment for the unknown one, you have to delete that device and try again. Another very common thing is that if you do required deployments, and again, you want to reimage the same device, you actually have to clear the Pixie flag for that. And that can be done on either an entire collection of devices. See, I have a few here that I was deploying earlier. Actually, a few hundred I was deploying earlier. But well, 55 are live, so let's do that one. And you just do the clear required Pixie deployment, or you go to the device itself and do the same thing. Or as I was doing it, I had a PowerShell script that I was using that went ahead and cleared the deployment. So stuff like that you can do to simplify that process. Other than that, there are a few things to check. One is that the boot image that you are using is actually enabled for Pixie. So that's a good start, and you can verify that it shows up in the right folder on the DP, indicating that it's there, meaning you have actually distributed it. I've lost count the number of times I forgot to distribute a boot image and then scratching my head why the deployment doesn't start. And all right, that's why. Then, of course, it's helpful to see that the sequence that you're using uh, is actually using that boot image, so that you haven't changed that part. But other than that, most Pixel problems they're not your fault. They're usually the network folks that messed something up, reconfigured a scope option or changed an IP helper or forgot to set an IP helper. So often a lot of Pixie troubles that you have to review ends up with you going back to the network folks and say, knocking on their door and say, hey guys, I believe you accidentally broke something. So can you help me troubleshoot this?
Yep.
All right. Long answer, short question.
All right. Well, we did have another question come in from Jamie on YouTube. What are your thoughts of delivery optimization and Microsoft Connected Cache Server for Azure? Do you think it's better going the Microsoft route rather than a third vendor to deliver the content?
So first of all, I haven't seen any third-party vendor for DO content. There are plenty for ConfigMgr content, but Microsoft never exposed the equivalent of an alternate content provider for DO. So if there is one, I just have never seen it. And in terms of using a cache server, one of those lovely, it depends. But I use one in my lab because I'm spinning up, as I mentioned, hundreds of machines at a time, and my internet connection is not the greatest. So I'm having a cache server here in the lab that takes care of all that traffic. Because when you have a few hundred VMs coming up and want to download a gig each, well, it nukes my internet connection for sure. The Microsoft online version of it that was released or made available for ISPs, it's indeed intended for ISPs only. I haven't seen the other one being made available yet for normal enterprises. But I mean, the one that is in ConfigMgr is working really, really great. It's been available for a few years now, and it works for both Windows content and Intune content. And you can just install a site server with the DP role, and you don't use it for ConfigMgr things. You just use it as a cache server. It won't have any clients. It just acts there as a, I was about to say like a Microsoft Proxy 2.0 server, but for those of you that remember that one. But it's just caching content. It does that really, really well. And it doesn't consume much space either.
Mm-mm.
Typically uses less than 100 gig total.
Not bad considering what you'd be saving in bandwidth, especially in a large organization.
Oh, yeah, we're talking terabytes and terabytes of downloads.
Mm-hmm.
One of our customers that I worked with, they were downloading 2 terabytes a day of DO content. That's a lot of content.
Mm-hmm.
They were downloading about 500 gig of ConfigMgr content. So that between 4 and 5 times more ConfigMgr stuff that we're using with DO. That's significant. But yeah. Awesome questions now here in the sprint. Good.
That's right.
Like it.
Same.
I mean, the setup is not terribly complicated. to get a connected cache going. That's it. Checkbox. The default settings below are okay.
Couldn't get much easier.
Nope, that works. Even an elderly geek can do that. Yep. And I saw the follow-up comment here. There's a lot of people named Jim, Jamie, and James today. Yes, indeed there is. Popular name.
Yeah, I'll say. That's funny.
But I do not see any more questions coming in. Give it another 10 seconds or so. Almost said 10 minutes there. That would be a long wait.
Take us a little over.
Yeah. But all right then, that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you Andrew for joining as well, and we hope to see you again in 7 days. Have a great day.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir, and thanks everybody for joining. Have a great one.